So, what we're talking about here, in a way, is becoming miracle-minded, which is we're learning a new way of thinking. Because as the Course in Miracles says at one point, you have been very poorly taught. And we've been very poorly taught by society, by our parents, by the world, by the news, by the ain't it awful kind of a thinking mind that sees problems everywhere. You know, the Course is really asking us to stop seeing problems everywhere and to start actually being able to see that even in those that you may have some trouble with, that there's an innocent child in there. There's a whole spiritual being that's there who is very much in need of your love and your attention. This is, you've heard me say many times in the past, one of the things that I learned by being a teacher in prison was that there's some just lovely, lovely human beings there that were my students who got themselves into really, really big trouble because they made some very, very, very poor choices. And that's true for, at large, for folks out there. So that's a part of the way that the Course is asking us to change our thinking, and we're changing our thinking to seeing the innocence, to seeing the wholeness, to seeing, if you will, the child. And once we're able to do that, it really makes it much easier for you to love whatever, whomever you're looking at. This is a part of the retraining the mind. We're not looking for difficulty. We're not looking for problems. We're looking for what's right. And we're appreciating what's right. This is just like, I like the language analogy, learning another language. This is part of learning the other language, which is just learning another way of thinking. So the miracle-mindedness says, you do not guard your thoughts carefully enough. It's kind of like what you were talking about getting outraged by somebody on the car in the street or something. You know, you just, you know, the slightest little thing can take the peace of mind away from us. And so if you allow little things to take the peace of mind away from you, wow, I mean, that's really a place where you can learn to begin to change your mind about the way you see things, right? You may feel at this point it would take a miracle to enable you to do that. It's true, right? But keep in mind what a miracle is. A miracle is something that's perfectly natural. The way it is now, our thinking is unnatural. Unnatural simply means that we're not thinking in alignment with the mind of God, that we're not thinking in alignment with heaven, if you will, right? So that's why we're so unhappy. That's why there's so much unhappiness in the world, because of this incredibly distorted way of thinking that finds problems all the time. Okay, so you are not used to miracle-minded thinking, but you can be trained to think that way. So this is, again, a course in mind training. We're training ourselves to start thinking this other way. Okay. So what is miracle-mindedness? So a miracle is a change of mind that shifts perception from the ego's view of sin, guilt, and fear to the Holy Spirit's world of forgiveness, which is very much what you were saying earlier, James, right? In other words, we stop seeking out, confirming, amplifying, and analyzing sin. The ego loves to analyze sin. You know, it loves to... anybody know who Billy Sunday was? No, you probably don't. Billy Sunday was a famous preacher from the early part of the 20th century. He was called a baseball preacher because he was a big baseball fan, right? And he says, I'm against sin. Now, I'll fight it. I'll kick it. I'll bite it. He was known for his gestures and his big expression, but it was all about, I'm against sin, and I want to fight sin, and I want to get, and when I get old and toothless, I'll chew it to death. Honestly, that's a quote from Billy Sunday. But that's an attitude. The attitude is that it's something that has to be destroyed or killed or done away with. The Course is trying to help us to see that this is something that needs to be loved. This is something that needs gentleness. This is something that needs care. And that really is, that's a solution, even in the cases where you don't know what a solution is. By that I mean, let's say you don't know how to help somebody, psychologically speaking. Well, just love them. I mean, that's all. It's just love, and let them, honestly, and let them know that you do love them. And love is a healing power. I mean, literally, it sounds like a cliche, but it's really true. Even if you don't know the right words to say to help somebody, and very often we don't know the right words to say to help someone, but if the love is there, that's the help, right? That's the fix. That's the sharing. That's the connecting, right? Now that we stop seeking out sin, we stop talking about all the things that there are to be afraid of. Stop building systems of defense. You ever notice that once you get around some of your friends maybe that just spend so much time talking about the world and how screwed up it is and how awful it is and how, well, it's really the same that it's always been. We look like we got political chaos going on right now. There's always been political chaos. And there's always been wars going on, and there's always been fighting going on. There's always been somebody in opposition to somebody else. And it doesn't make any difference. That's the position, what the position you want to take is not a position. I mean, it's a non-positionality. That's like being anonymous again. And let's go back to, you got to have the mic. You got to do the mic.
Gabby Hayes over here today.
You are Gabby Hayes.
Gabby Hayes.
I
just shared something with my brother over here, a friend. It's a very subtle shift, right? We say we want to give love, but we really have to get out of the way and let the Holy Spirit heal this person, right? When we're giving the love, because it's not really happening. And there's things handed down through the Gospel of Thomas, or people have channeled Thomas, and he was talking about how everybody just misinterpret Christ, from the crucifixion to the suffering. And he was take St. Thomas in conference, and he would share a lot of things. He said, you don't want to say these things to these people because they'll kill you right now. They'll kill you if you say these things because they don't get it yet. They have to put, they're always testing Christ. Is this a sin? Is this, there's all these metrics, once again, of the ego testing Christ all along. And he only shared things with certain people. But just take the profoundness of the statement. Everybody says there was always, can miracles move mountains? Right? This was given to Christ a lot. And he says, and he answered it, of course miracles can move mountains. But where would you put it? The axiom is that it's not there. We keep playing with out here. Like we're going to change something out here. And like if you get into that, now that's a high standard of humor. That had energy. If you get it, that has an extreme amount of energy. And that's where the game is. Christ laughed a lot. There was a lot of laughter.
You laugh a lot when you do get to a higher perspective, because then you can look back and you see the foolishness of the ego. And I hope you laugh at yourself more than anything else in terms of seeing how insane you are. That's a good sign. That now you can change things a little bit, right? All right. So the last quote here at the bottom is from the Course. The atonement is the only defense that cannot be used destructively because it is not a device you made. So the Course talks about all the different kinds of ego defenses that there are. We won't go into talking about ego defenses. But the Course says that for every ego defense that there is, the Holy Spirit has another way of using that same defense, right? But it uses it constructively rather than destructively, right? It's helpful rather than, let's take projection. Okay, so we all know that projection makes perception, and that's what we're talking about here in Gopal, because we're talking about seeing problems, all right? But there is a kind of projection that is the right kind of projection, and that is the extension of love. So what we're doing is what we're projecting is we're projecting the love rather than projecting the judgment, rather than projecting the condemnation. It's just a matter of switching it around. But that's true for all the ego defenses, except for the atonement. The atonement, of course, is a defense that cannot be used destructively. It can only be used constructively, right? So this is the thing which is getting us back home. This is the process of remembering the truth of who you really are. This is how the atonement works. It's not a device you made. So the ego made up anger and attack as defenses, but that's not true in this case because you didn't make this one up. So let's talk about the atonement principle. So this is from the Course. So it was in effect long before the atonement began. It was like it was there but wasn't needed, right? The principle was love, and the atonement was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation because belief in space and time did not exist. Now this is a really important point, okay? Belief in space and time did not exist. So we have created this world. So what we created was space and time. We created a place that the ego could live in, which, if you will, was then perceived as being separate from God. This is a hiding place. You remember back in the 60s, Harry Belafonte had a song, "There's No Hiding Place Down There." It's actually an old black song about, gospel song about, "Once I went out to hide my face, I rocked right back, no hiding place, there's no hiding place down there." We tried, the ego is very good at hiding. The primary mechanism for hiding, of course, is lying, right? And deception. Anything that we do and we think will get us what we want you just tell a lie. You just hide it. You just engage in some sort of deceptive process. The problem with that is it's always going to make you sick. Hiding, lying makes us sick. This is one of the purposes of therapy, or at least one of the purposes of psychotherapy, right? And that's one of the reasons why catharsis, getting it out, that's one place where the Catholic Church did get something kind of right. By that I mean, the idea of confession but, then you don't want to do that to the point of amplifying it like you're a sinner to make it all wrong. You've got to have the forgiveness there along with it, but you've got to be forgiving yourself for it, for whatever it is. And unless that's there, then it's not forgiveness, right? So, acts were not necessary before the separation. Belief in space and time. We are trapped in bodies, in a world, in time. Did you ever feel like you'd like to get out of here? I mean, well, really, out of the body, because, you wake up every day and here you are again. You never actually even left, and now you got to get up and you got to go to work. And, well, you don't have to go to work, but...
It's like Grandpa.
Eventually she's got to go back. You want to eat. But you understand what I'm saying. It's like it's sometimes like this never-ending sort of thing, and there's no peace of mind. But there is peace of mind, right? Even in this space and in this time, by recognizing the truth, the identity of who we are, and recognizing that this thing that we've made up is not eternal, and it never was, and it can't be. there is a you that's eternal, and that's what we're carving down to. That's as we erase and remove all the external stuff. That's the statue that Da Vinci is talking about, right? It's inside. All right, to finish this quote. It was only after the separation the atonement and the conditions necessary for its fulfillment were planned. Then a defense so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. Refusal could not, however, turn into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of other defenses. The other defenses can be used for the purposes of attacking, like anger, attack itself of all forms, denial, right? The atonement thus becomes the only defense that's not a two-edged sword. It can only heal. It doesn't cut going in and out, right? All right, and go on. So reawakening spiritual vision. You can temporize. You're capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your Creator. You set the limits on your ability to miscreate. Tolerance for pain may be high, but it's not without limit. This is back to there must be another way. Eventually, everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way. So this is where it actually appears, the phrase that Bill said to Helen comes up in the Course itself. As this recognition becomes firmly established, it becomes a turning point. That was the turning point. And it's actually interesting. That experience happened in June of 1965. Helen didn't actually begin to write the Course until October of 1965. So it didn't happen right away, right? So, but it was still, that was the turning point. They both recognized that was the point at which things began to change. But there was a lot going on inside her that was leading up to this, to the Course itself, including the fact that Helen had a lot of very vivid dreams and even visionary experiences. So if you begin to have visionary dream experiences, really pay attention to that. And Bill encouraged her to write down these dreams, right? That's something a good psychotherapist might do, write down your dreams. And actually it's in the process of writing down one of the visionary experiences when the sentence, "This is a Course in Miracles," appeared. All of a sudden, there it was, right there, this giving way to it, sort of relaxing. And all of a sudden, we've got the first line of A Course in Miracles. As this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. It's ultimately a reawakened spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in spiritual sight. So that's what we're talking. We're completely changing the way we see. One of the things you're seeing that everything from a spiritual point of view. It's not about the world. It's not about materiality. It's not about things. It's not about the stuff that's out there in the world. It never was about any of that sort of stuff. A friend of mine who sends a Course in Miracles quote around to his friends every day. Every day I'll start off with a quote from the Course from one of my friends. And the one that he sent around a couple days ago, and I wish I had captured it and put it in the slides, but I didn't, was something about how easy it is for the ego to get caught in some sort of material value that then it makes real, which then reinforces the nature of the ego. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like something like, we'll take, for example, getting a fancy new car, okay? So now we got this something that we can be proud of here, that we can demonstrate that it's, but that quote goes on to say, it doesn't talk about fancy new cars. It's just an old way of illustrating it, but you're actually selling your soul in the process of doing that. You understand? But by getting caught up in fame and fortune, for example, by in other words, making something of the world more valuable than the spiritual approach, you're losing yourself rather than affirming your real self. Okay? Because now you let something outside become more valuable than what's inside. That's about this changing vision, changing perspective. And what we're really looking for is the connectivity of all experiences, understanding that all experiences are spiritual learning processes. So even with the mistakes that we make, we're making the right choices, which are going to help us learn something somewhere along the way. But it's better not to learn through error, and better not to learn through mistakes. All right? So back to this. So now we're going to talk about changing for the rest of the piece here in a very specific way. And this is a very specific way we call habit. So we got three wise thinkers here to start with. Aristotle, moral excellence or virtue comes about via habit. We are what we do. Habit is ingrained in us. We have all kinds of habit. I bet you the way you spend the first hour of every day is pretty much a pattern, right? You brush your teeth before you shower before you brush your teeth. I don't care what the pattern is. You've got a pattern that kind of works for you. You fix coffee before you, whatever it is, right? All right, so this is the way we live because this is partly, that's not something that's wrong with it. It's the way we get things done, right? But moral excellence or virtue also comes about via habit. Just as we can have bad habits, we can have good habits, right? So, the second quote is from Augustine. Habit, if not resisted, soon becomes necessity. So what is your necessity? And then William James, habit is second nature, or rather 10 times nature. So it sort of becomes us. In the Don Juan Carlos Castaneda series, at one point he talks about breaking habits, right? About getting out of, because the pattern itself can become a way of sleeping, right? Now the Course in Miracles, on the other hand, I think it's like principle number, 4, 5, somewhere right in there. I said that before, but it's one of the very, very early ones, is that miracles are habits. They should be involuntary. I mean, they shouldn't be consciously. It says consciously selected miracles can be misguided. Right? So, sure. Because it should become a natural way of being, a natural way of thinking, so that love becomes a habit, for example, okay? That we just automatically are thinking and loving in a spontaneous way. We don't have to think about being patient. By nature, we are patient, right? In the beginning, you got to think about it. But you got to, in order to begin to change it. Just as that's true for when you want to learn something. You want to learn something. You want to learn somebody's name. Then what you probably want to do is you want to think about it. Or you don't just hear it. You repeat it to yourself a couple of times. You go over, you deliberately make an attempt to remember it, and then you can remember. Then it's easy. Now it's a simple, it's a habit, but it's just a process that no longer requires thought. Right? Let's go on. So the habit of engaging with God and His creation is easily made if you actively refuse to let your mind slip away. The problem is not one of concentration. It's the belief that no one, including yourself, is worth consistent effort. So a little bit of consistent effort here, right? This is a continuation of the same quote. Side with me consistently against this deception, and do not permit this shabby belief, the belief in the ego, to pull you back. The disheartened are useless to themselves and to me, but only the ego can be disheartened. You know, another way to talk about this, a lot of things that only the ego could be. Only the ego can get upset. Only an ego can be disappointed. Only an ego can be projective in the negative sense of the term, or condemnatory, right? Yeah, Beverly, you got to have a mic. You got a mic? All right, so somebody see to Beverly gets a mic. Yeah, and turned on.
I saw a wonderful movie the other night called Hidden Figures, and it was about a bunch of black women in the 60s that were the actual people that did the computations for NASA.
Oh, uh-huh.
And yet they were treated so badly. They were forced to sit on the back of the bus, and one of them was with her son, and he said, "But why do we have to sit on the back of the bus?" And she said, "Don't worry about it. When you act right, you are right." And I thought that was beautiful.
Very, it's beautiful. That is nice, yeah. All right. So the disheartened are useless to themselves and to me, but only the ego can be disheartened. All right, let's go on. Oops. You've taught yourself the most unnatural habit of not communicating with your Creator. I would really like to emphasize this one, but I sort of talked about this a little bit earlier. The most unnatural habit is not communicating. Naturally, this is why as you begin to develop this is why I talked about earlier about leading a guided life. When you begin to feel as though you're leading a guided life, that you are making the right decisions, and because you make the right decisions, you will make more right decisions. It begins to become a natural habit, right? But we have taught ourselves to think completely outside of the mind of communicating with God, or we've lost the connection with the Spirit. You can't. The good news is you can't completely lose it, and because you can't completely lose it, because there's always a little bit of opportunity there. It's just a matter of breeding it back again, and you'll get it back. Being in direct communication with God, Holy Spirit, is natural. What is not natural is trying to make it on our own. That's, what the ego is trying to do is to try to be a self-made man or a self-made woman, right? I'll do it my way. That's the theme song of the ego, right? Well, that's fine, except it's very lonely. And in the long run, you're not even going to get what you want. You may create a world. You may make a lot of money. You may have position or status or power or whatever it is. That's what the egos are always going for, power, right?
Become president.
Well, it could be. That's what a thought. Right, but that doesn't mean that this individual's happy, right? In fact, you'll never be happy that way. You'll never be happy getting what you want in the world. Yeah, because that's fleeting and temporal. It's not lasting. That's why I mentioned earlier about all the tyrants that. Okay, so Genghis Khan conquered most of the quote known world at the time, but what did he get him? Being in direct communication with God is natural. What is not natural is trying to make it on your own. Okay. So this is just a story about the teachings of Zen. So a scholar visited a Zen master and asked, what is the teaching of Zen? The master cited a verse from the Dhammapada. Do no wrong, do only good. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. But, said the scholar, a 3-year-old child knows that. A 3-year-old may know it, the master said, but an 80-year-old may find it difficult to practice. What we're working on here is practice. Practice, practice, practice. That's why we have 365 lessons. And this is one of the things that makes A Course in Miracles so incredibly unique amongst teaching tools. There's nothing like this in the Bible. It's interesting that Helen was a teacher, a professional teacher who gets us, who comes up with a workbook and a textbook and a teacher's manual and all the stuff that's necessary to begin to change the way we see things. Okay. There's no point in trying to change the world. It's incapable of change because it's merely an effect. What does that mean? It's merely an effect.
Of our minds.
Yes. It's an effect of our minds. Okay, so it's what we're seeing. So if you're looking at the world and you're hating it, that's an effect of your mind. If you're looking at the world and you're loving it, that's an effect of your mind. Right? But there is indeed a point in changing your thoughts about the world. Here are you changing the cause. It always goes back to the cause. It's the result. Projection makes perception. And perception is a choice. And the Course makes it, and you are always either projecting or extending one of the two. That's a very, I think I talked about this a couple of months ago. It's a really important. You are always either doing one of the two things. You're either projecting or extending. You're either condemning it or loving it. It's so simple. Just think about it. Think about it if that's not true. And we like to condemn, or the ego
Can
does.
you say a little bit more about that?
Well, again, just sort of notice how often, over coffee or tea or watching television, the news, or whatever it is, you or somebody else might be talking about what's going on and how awful it is and how things ought to be changed. You're not that way. You're a good person, but you see all the bad that's out there. Wait a minute. you know, what are you seeing? Or can we just let this be what it is? That's really the main thing. That's about incapable of change. Don't try to change it. Right? Now, this doesn't mean, I'll do the next slide here. This doesn't mean that you don't do good where you see the opportunity to do good. In fact, I think I talk about it in this slide. The first thing we want to do is to stop attacking the world in thought, word, and deed. The problem is not out there ever. The problem is always in the mind of the perceiver. That's why we need to change our mind about the world. We're at all times loving the world or condemning it. There's only these two choices. That's what I was just saying. Not trying to change the world does not mean that we do not do good where and when we can. Indeed, the psychotherapy pamphlet tells us that those we are to help will be sent to us. For some people, this may mean working on a larger global scale, and for others, it might just mean dealing with whoever is in front of you. In fact, as most of the time, that is the case. Most of the time, it's just loving whoever, the waitress who's waiting on you, or the child that's screaming at you, or the husband or the wife that's your immediate partner, or whatever, right? So, and don't worry about, it's not about going out there on some great missionary effort. It's going to come to you, right? This is very important, and the thing that you want to do, don't turn it away. I mean, don't say I can't help. I mean, you may not loan somebody $1,000, but there are things that we can do in any case, right? Although sometimes, of course, you need to set boundaries, but boundaries can be set in a very loving way. But there's this lady who calls me a lot, started to it, and I finally said to her the other day, you know, hon, you're going to have to stop calling every day, okay? Can you call like every other day? All right, you know. You know, it wasn't just you got to stop this. You know, she's a very lovely soul, but let's cut back a little bit. You know, and she was very kind. She understood. She said, okay, all right. So any good teacher will tell you that learning through rewards is more effective than learning through pain. Pain is an ego illusion and can never induce more than a temporary effect. It's much more fun to learn through rewards, right? Which really just means accomplishment. I mean, you're actually learning another language, for example, and you're actually enjoying the fact that you're learning another language, or you're learning how to play a musical instrument, and you're enjoying the fact that you're learning how to play a musical instrument, or whatever it is that you're improving on as you go through the process. Now, I want to talk a little bit about reality theory. Anybody remember Glasser by any chance? All right, well, and there's a handout that's got stuff about him too. So William Glasser was a psychologist. Psychiatrist during the 60s and the 70s, who decided not to focus so much on psychoanalysis and examining the unconscious, because he wanted to get effective change now, right? And he comes up with these 3 R's, and they were realism, responsibility, right and wrong. And I was thinking about this actually earlier this morning myself. I think another R that I could put in there is, or maybe that's fit in there, is reason. Reason's a very important concept in the Course, using our reason, right? You've got this mind with a little bit of, if you use your reason correctly, but let's talk about realism, responsibility, right and wrong. The Course has a lot to say about responsibility. If you're having trouble making a decision, the real question is, what is the most responsible thing that I can do? And you know when you're not being responsible, because you nag yourself. Just like you know when you are being responsible, because you feel good about yourself. All right, so let's look at this. First with the Course. So miracle-mindedness means right-mindedness. So now we're here at the right. So the Course in Miracles talks about called right-mindedness and wrong-mindedness. So at the simplest level, this means, are we choosing with the ego, or are we choosing with the Holy Spirit? Right-mindedness focuses on that part of our separated mind that contains the Holy Spirit, the voice for forgiveness and reason. So we're just learning how to listen to this. We are repeatedly asked to choose between right and wrong mind, to follow the Holy Spirit or the ego. Following right-mindedness means returning the one mind to the one mind of Christ. We've been talking about this all along here. This is the only thing you need. So we all know this, right? Memorize this. All right, this is chapter 21, section 2. I probably have done this 9 or 10 times in this class since we started 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. So, but let's go over it. This is the only thing you need to do for vision, happiness, release from pain, complete escape from sin, all to be given you. Say only this. And then this next line is a very important line, but mean it. But mean it with no reservation, for here the power of salvation lies. And if I really mean this, I wish every Course in Miracles student could memorize this next passage. All right? I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goal I would achieve, and everything, double underline everything, that seems to happen to me, I ask for. And I receive as I have asked. So if something happens and you say, well, I didn't ask for this, look deeper. Go deeper down. Because it is your experience. So you are having this experience. So if you're having this experience, cosmologically speaking, in the higher dimensions of things, you did indeed ask for this. Because it's been given to you. This is a part of your learning. So what you need to do now is to just simply be responsible. How simple is the obvious again, right? Years ago, many, back in the 70s, we're in the 70s, I took a class, or I took a Saturday seminar on time management, right? And one of the themes in time management was, well, number one, to do the most important now, right? And also is do the worst first. You know what I mean by do the worst first? In other words, you do the thing that you don't want to do. Get that done. Early in the day, when your mind is still fresh and you're a little bit easier to tackle it than you are when you're tired later on and you don't want to even begin to look at it, right? Smiling like that. Huh?
Is that a sin?
No. I'm just kidding you, you know that. Okay, So it's just being, and you feel good when you're responsible, right? It just feels good to actually do it, all right? There you go. This is, I talked earlier about about Carlos Castaneda. I think of all of his books, the one that I enjoyed the most was Journey to Ixtlan, which is one of his earliest, the second or third book that Carlos wrote. So this is Don Juan talking, Don Juan Mateos from his series. For me, the world is weird because it's stupendous, awesome, mysterious, unfathomable. My interest, so he's talking to his student here, right? Has been to convince you, you must assume responsibility for being here. In this marvelous desert at this marvelous time. So they're in the desert. So I'm going to say to you, you must assume responsibility for being here in this incredible city at this incredible time, right? Just change it around a little bit. We're not in the desert. We're in quite the opposite of the desert here, right? I want to convince you, you must learn to make every act count. Since you're going to be here only for a short while, in fact, too short for witnessing all the marvels of it. Okay? It's true in the desert and it's true in the city. It's true wherever you are. Principle 6 and 21 from the 50 Miracles Principles. Miracles are natural. We said about this earlier. When they don't occur, something's gone wrong. So it should feel, following the guidance of the Holy Spirit should feel very natural. It should feel like this is the most natural thing that there is. We have a new grandson as of last May, and my wife is having so much fun. And she's falling, we all are, in love with this baby all the time. It's just the most natural thing. I mean, it's just the simplest, most natural thing in the world to have this happen. Miracles are natural signs of forgiveness. Through miracles, you accept God's forgiveness by extending it to others. That's the real wonderful part about forgiveness, is that if you really, really do it, and you really let something go, then you'll have this realization, oh my God, I'm the one who's forgiven. I'm the one who's been set free. And it never did have anything to do with the other. It was not about what was going on outside of me. It was just about what was happening inside of me. Okay, so back to Glasser. So Glasser wrote this book in 1976, and I remember reading the book back in 1976, so I dug it out. Right, this actually made the New York Times bestseller list in 1976. So he came up with this idea of what he called positive addiction, or habits. And this is his definition of positive addiction. So let's look at it. So positive addiction is something anyone can try for. There's no risk, since its positive addictions are simply activities that can be easily accomplished. There's no possibility of failure in what you're attempting to do. What is hard is to do them long enough to become addicted. But if you will quit, you're no worse off. So you haven't lost anything, right? So we're just talking about reversing addiction. So rather than being addicted to the ego and all of its ways of seeing and being, we're going to switch it. So here are the characteristics of first we're going to do there's also on the sheet of paper I handed out to all of you. Actually, let's look at, I'll do it by the board, but here, look at that sheet of paper. Y'all got the sheet of paper? Look on the back. And for those who don't have the sheet of paper, the folks that are watching on YouTube, you can see it on the screen. So, what's interesting is to look at both sides. I deliberately put them on the piece of paper side by side so you can see. So first we'll look at the negative habits or addictions, all right? Number one, we choose to do it. We devote time to it. One good test of a true addiction is that it's probably something you do every day. An alcoholic drinks every day, right? Two, we do it easily. It doesn't take a great deal of effort to, and I'm through some negatives in here, light a cigarette, pour another drink, veg out in front of the TV. Three, we often do it alone. Negative. Okay? We are not proud of ourselves when we do it or engage in this addiction. So I often hide the fact that we do it, right? You go out back, so to speak, right? Four, it seems to have value. And I don't know what put the word seems in quotation marks there. Smoking calms us down, drinking makes us temporarily forget our problems, the drugs help us to kind of space out. Right? Five, we criticize ourselves when we do it. We know that it hurts, and yet that doesn't stop us from doing it because it's such an ingrained habit. Right? Six, if we persist at it, things will get worse. Our health will deteriorate, relationships will suffer, be less effective at work, finance will be depleted, self-esteem destroyed. Things will get worse. Now, what's interesting is to notice positive addictions. And you notice that the first three are exactly the same as the negative. We choose to do it. We devote time to it. We may or may not do it every day. Two, we do it easily. It does not take a great deal of effort to do it. According to Aristotle, moral action is easier and more pleasurable than immoral action. In other words, it's effortless to be nice. It requires energy to be unpleasant. Going on. Three, we can do it alone. It's non-competitive. Walking, reading, writing, playing a musical instrument, meditating are all examples of solo acts. We do it alone. We may do it, some of these with others, but we often just do it alone. Two, it has value for us. Now, if you notice before, with four, on the negative, it said it seems to have value. Right now we're switching over to it actually does have value. You know, smoking doesn't have value. This has value. It enriches, improves our lives. Mentally, physically, financially, socially, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, right? And we do not criticize ourselves. So right, five is totally different. So with five before, we criticize ourselves. Five on this one, we do not criticize ourselves. In fact, we feel better when we do it. And six, if we persist at it, things will get better. The six before was if we persist, things will get worse, right? Our health, finances, relationships will improve. We persist long enough, we might even become a master at our art, a specialist, an expert, a virtuoso in the field, right? And, good. Any of this questions or discussions about that? So this is a part of the retraining of the mind, in which I'm using a very practical illustration from a psychologist of the 60s and 70s, or a psychiatrist of the 60s and 70s. This stuff works. That's the whole thing about it. But you're retraining yourself. But you got to decide, again, you got to wanna. You got to decide that you want to do this, to engage in this process. When all reality has been withdrawn from whatever was never true, can it be hard to give it up and choose what must be true? I think that's our last slide. It is. Okay. So let's just dialogue about it. I've thrown a lot of information out here in the past hour and a half or more. The question is a matter of motivation, doing it. Do you want to do it? Do you want to? Here we are in the beginning of a year. And beginning of a year, you're always thinking about making some improvements and changing, right? What would you like to change? I'm not asking to say out loud necessarily. I wonder if we could do a little exercise. If you have a piece of paper and pencil, you can do this. If you don't have a piece of paper and pencil, just do it in your head. Okay? But see if you got a piece of paper and pencil. I can say that. So I'm going to ask you a question. And then if you got paper and pencil, write it down. If you don't, think to yourself, say to yourself, I would be happier if what? What kind of conditions would prevail? What would you be happier if what? Now, can some people answer that question for me? James? Well, I got to have the mic.
If I accepted the Holy Spirit.
That's a good one. That's kind of a good one, and where we're going all day today, and kind of a big one. All right? Stop playing, I can't hear the voice of the Holy Spirit. Stop saying it's not there. Actually, the more that you do this course, the more you realize it is there. And the more you realize that there's an answer there. This is the wrong-minded and the right-mindedness again. There is a right-minded answer. There's a right-minded approach. And you can hear that, and you can follow that, and feel good about that. But it takes practice. Anybody else got something they would share? I mean, I realize that you're sharing, keep in mind you're sharing with the world if you share it, so you may not want to share it with the world. Paul?
I would be happier if I stopped watching the news.
Well, that's a pretty easy thing to fix, isn't it? All you got to do is stop watching the news. Did anybody come up with, I'd be happier if somebody else was different? You don't have to answer that. I mean, I'm just, if somebody else would change. I've done this in the past at other kind of workshop situations, and people, and you know, that's when you got to really look at. Because it's certainly not about anybody else changing. Giselle?
I think I would be happier if I stopped blaming myself when I don't listen to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's the guilt.
Because I tend to blame myself a lot, and then I feel that I cannot do the course anymore, or I'm not doing it well.
You're not doing it right.
And it takes me away from it. So I recognized how I blame myself when I'm not doing the course the way I think I should. And that is an ego device to keep me away from the course. So I've just recognized that lately, fully recognized it.
Right.
And I want to stop doing that.
I think everybody in the room would probably identify with that. I mean, the times when you nag yourself for not paying attention. So it's just a lesson. You recognize that that's true. So now you can change it. Billy?
Yeah, when you say, like, you meet negative people, you know, I don't want to be getting angry at negative people. Part of this course, I try to reinforce, you know, maybe it's not happening, or I don't want to, you know, you walk in the store, lady seems to always have a problem with me. You feel like, you know, remember Steve Martin used to say, well, excuse me for living, you know what I mean? But that's what my problem sometimes. I see negative sometimes in people, and I'm trying to erase it, or should I just face it or erase it, or what do you do then?
You just let it be what it is. That's again one of my major themes of I keep harping in the Course. Let him be who he is. Seek not to make of love an enemy. Let her be who she is. Let the situation be what it is. Leave it alone. This is really not your problem. This is really not even your business, And so that's why the quote about earlier about changing the world. Don't try to change the world. Or you don't even need to want to change the world. You may watch the world with some degree of fascination, in terms of the way that it keeps changing. But that doesn't mean that I got to get in there and want to move things around. Right? Then I've lost my peace of mind if that's the case. James, take the mic.
I think the point with the Holy Spirit, miracles happen when we don't change the world or we don't interfere with them. To have the adamant faith of letting him take care of it. He's saying, I will take care of it. All you have to be is witness to it. You don't have to do anything. And that's very hard for us. I was thinking about your lady calling you up. And years ago, I was a Jungian. And Carl Jung had a special case. He had a patient. The woman had a crush on him and was going to marry him. And he never said anything. And he said, we're going to get married. I'm going to marry you, blah, blah, blah. And this went on for months and months. The planning of the wedding, everything, planning. He never responded to it. The wedding, is this day. He never said no, yes, if or but. He just listened and listened and listened and listened. It got like a week or a few days before the wedding. She called up and called the wedding off. He just let her play out he just listened and let her play out the psychosis, whatever she was working through, her infatuation. He didn't participate at all. All he did was listen, and she went through probably the planning of the wedding, calling him up, what he'll wear, what everybody's going to be, what the uncle's going to do, what the aunt's going to do, what everybody's going to do. She went through all that, and now how stressful weddings are. Everybody goes crazy with weddings. Well, she went through the whole thing herself, and then just 2 days, 3 days before, called him up and called the whole thing off. Right. And that's what happens if we stay out of the way of it. He had the wisdom to stay out of the way, and he had a penchant for what insightful idea what was going to happen, and he let her play it out, and it just popped like a balloon.
The same thing is if you're dealing with somebody who's paranoid. I think it's the same process too. You certainly don't reinforce it. You don't say that there's any kind of reality to it. You just keep loving them. You just keep loving them, and through it, and eventually they have to work it out themselves. But they realize that there's no reason for the paranoia, right? But you can't change somebody else's mind. That's the whole thing. We can only change our own minds, but we can love them in such a way that they will change their minds. Right? It's especially true, for being a parent, for example, right? Would be a very good example. The parent isn't coming down hard on the child and condemning the child for the way the child is misbehaving. It doesn't mean you don't provide the right direction, and you don't let them know what you think the right direction is. But the main thing is that you're there as a loving figure, regardless of the decision that's made. Right? That's what God is in relationship to us in terms of the Course in Miracles. God is just always there, continuing to love us, seeing that we make some very bad choices in the course of life. And what all the Holy Spirit is doing is just saying, well, here's the right choice. And you don't have to choose it, but I'm just showing this is the right decision. I think I told you once about or more than once maybe, about a difficulty I was having with another, quote, brother. And I really asked, how do I handle this? And I heard, let me handle it. Well, what a great answer. I don't have to do anything. I literally need to do nothing. Just let let the Holy Spirit, let this energy, this love energy, handle it, and you leave it alone. There's nothing to. That the problem is thinking that something has to be fixed, and there's nothing that has to be fixed. Love is the fix that we introduce into the situation, and then it fixes itself. Okay? But go ahead, you got the mic.
You got the power, right?
Yeah.
No, the biggest thing lately, my aha moment you're teaching is that who is that person that's opened the can of beer? When I tell it to other people, they think I'm crazy. Like,
No, good.
They're thinking they're saying who is controlling what we're doing, and they're like, okay, yeah, right. But
That's a very important point. I have a whole chapter in one of my previous books called "Who Pulls the Puppet Strings?" In other words, who's making the decisions, and who does pop open the top on the can of beer, or whatever it is, the decision that is being made to do that. Who lights the cigarette? Who takes an extra helping? Well, I mean, these are all just very mundane kind of physical things, but they have an effect upon us. They have an effect on our self-esteem. They have an effect on our health and that sort of thing. Giselle, you wanted to take the mic.
If there's something going on politically, and
Or speak right into the mic, honey.
if something is going on, like stuff that's going on now politically,
Right.
and you feel leaning towards doing something that would affect change, because changes can be affected in this world, and
Okay.
and we all can take part in that.
Right.
And at the same time, carry the thought that none of this is real, and still do something. It's kind of like a very touchy thing to get involved in. I mean, wanting to do something that's going to affect change in the world, and also knowing at the same time that none of this is real and nothing is really going on, but there is a war, you know, and people are dying, and it might affect my family, it might affect me in my country or whatever.
Sure.
How do you affect that balance? You know,
Well, it doesn't
achieve
mean
that
that
balance?
it doesn't mean that you don't do things. It doesn't mean you don't give money to causes. It doesn't mean that you don't go and march. It doesn't mean that you don't participate in some way. But just keep the right perspective on it,
Right.
and don't get into the anger or the attack about it. If it makes you feel better to do it, do it. I think that's the simplest kind of guidance on it. As I said, some people may be, in a quote before, I said, some people may be called to be involved on a larger scale than others. Sometimes it's just one-on-one. Very often it's probably just one-on-one, right? Unless you're in a position where you...
War going on, you know, you
Right. Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, in the Hindu scriptures, Mahabharata, Arjuna, and it's the same with Christ said it, be in the world and not of it. Arjuna was instructed to fight the battle and not take it seriously, but to defend his honor and do his half, play the drama out, but not think it's real. And that's very tricky for us. And we got beat by the ultimate trickster. Trump's the magician, the Gemini. We don't even know what happened, right? And we keep, you know, us being our identity, we're really shook. I feel a lot of people are shook by this. I'm shook by it. I stopped listening to the news, and I was a news junkie. But this thing has got me, boom. I said, I'm done. And that was a gift. That was a great gift. And we keep thinking that, you know, we're going to, you know, we have pride and we have ego invested in America. And I'm as blue, red-blooded as everybody in American, blue collar, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we think we're going somewhere. But we always have to be cautious. The Holy Spirit says it like we're not going anywhere here. The clock is going to reset itself. The whole thing reset itself. We had Obama for 2 years. I guess we should be thankful. We thought we were going to get better and better and better, and we had our ideas to that. And yet, no. We feel like for us, we're befuddled. I'm befuddled. I'm just totally lost with this. But he's the typical iconic trick of the ego. right? Oh, you think you're going somewhere, but you're not. Now we're being tested on another level, you know? So it's very, very troublesome for us. It's a challenge for us, but maybe we could just laugh at it because it's kind of farcical where we're at now.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, kind of to take the higher road and kind of laugh at it.
Yeah,
Chris?
something that helps me in that direction is also remembering the cause and effect thing that we were discussing today, which is, you know, the war or the social problems or the political problems are just the effect. And we can do something about it, but it's much wiser to go to the cause.
Exactly.
And deal with it. So.
That's the always go to the cause. And always go to the mind. And how am I thinking? Did you have the whole?
I did. I wanted to say that as much of as a challenge that it will be, every day once Trump does take office, we have to see the sanity in him.
Right.
If you could to say that line that is so powerful about when you see a brother behaving insanely,
Right.
all one can do is see the sanity in him. And it is virtually impossible. And it is not impossible for me.
No.
I can. However, the way in which I respond is so knee-jerk, automatic, and complete that to really get in the way and prevent myself from going there and remembering that I need to see the sanity in him is quite a challenge, but that is about the only thing we truly can do.
Right.
In that
And
regard.
you said something else I think is very important, which is the knee-jerk reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be very aware of that knee-jerk reaction, and to look at the sanity or the insanity in that as well. Right? And back to James again, and then we're.
You say that, but just wait till he appoints Kim Kardashian as the ambassador to Russia. Okay? And then we're going to be tested, okay? Let's.
We might as well end on a humorous note. We didn't take a second break today, and so rather than take a second break, I'd like to do a meditation, and we'll just close a little bit early. How does that sound?
Good.
Our major theme today, a major theme, has been listening to the guidance of the Holy Spirit and recognizing that it's there. That's really one of the most important parts, just to be really very aware of the fact that this is not a fantasy. And this is really, in a lot of ways, the crux of the Course that makes it so different than a lot of other systems. It's just the recognition of the fact that there is a wise guide, that the ego does not rule in the long run. It's impossible. For the ego is a very temporal. It looks like it's eternal, but it's really very temporal. It will not always be in possession of your mind, because your mind was created by God. So what we're really looking to do is to give the mind back to God. So let's close our eyes and be quiet. And maybe start by taking a couple of deep breaths. And then relax into that. And then just hear these words. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. It's quite possible to listen to God's voice all through the day without interrupting your regular activity in any way. The part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you are aware of it or not. The other part of your mind functions in the world and obeys the world's laws. This part is constantly distracted, disorganized, and highly uncertain. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. The part that's listening to the voice for God is calm, always at rest, wholly certain. It's really the only part there is. The other part is a wild illusion, frantic and distraught, but without reality of any kind. Try today not to listen to it. Try to identify with the part of your mind where stillness and peace reign forever. Try to hear God's voice call to you lovingly, reminding you that your Creator has not forgotten you. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. We're actually trying to hear God's voice, reminding you of Him and of yourself. We approach this happiest and holiest of thoughts with confidence, knowing that in doing so we are joining our will with the will of God. He wants you to hear His voice. He gave it to you to be heard. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. Listen in deep silence. Be very still. Open your mind. Go past all the ruckus shriekings and sick imaginings that cover your real thoughts and obscure your eternal link with God. Sink deep into the peace that waits for you. Beyond the frantic, riotous thoughts and sights and sounds of this insane world, you do not live here. We are trying to reach your real home. We are trying to reach the place where you are truly welcome. We are trying to reach God. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. So be it. So thank you. And we will see you February 12th, I think it is, next class. Nice having the day with you.